afternoon, everyone. It is an incredible privilege to be here today in this historic institution, speaking to you, the future, on the topic of bringing independence and sovereignty back through the use of blockchain technology. I couldn't have imagined that a young boy growing up in Barbados, a very small developing island state in the Caribbean, would ever find himself here. Every history lesson I have known would have bet against this or worse. It would have simply rendered me invisible. But I am here today, excited and proud to talk about the technology built upon a pillar bearing the sign, "No one is invisible." In fact, it is built upon the understanding that we are all essential and connected. Indeed, the future of independence of systems and structures we build using blockchain will depend on us as a collective. But before I head on into the future, let me tell you a little bit about my past, my family's past. My great-grandparents migrated from Syria to Trinidad and Tobago in the 1920s, primarily due to discrimination faced by Christians. Later, my grandfather migrated from Trinidad to Barbados in the 1960s. When he first arrived in Barbados, white business owners refused to do business with him. Banks refused to bank him. Vendors wouldn't even touch his products. At that time, Syrians in the Caribbean, not unlike black people around the world, were labeled and discriminated against. Thankfully, that did not stop my grandfather from building a business and a life established in Barbados. You see, he was a pioneer. Having been excluded from the typical distributor sectors and circles, he had to innovate and turn to a market that those circles had no influence over. Long story short, my grandfather became the first man in the Caribbean to tap into the Asian markets. His prices and products became unbeatable. This was a threat to the white elites, but having secured his own independence, he was beyond their reach and out of their control. They also could not stop the black Barbadians from doing business with him. As far as my grandfather was concerned, black people were his brothers and sisters, and his business was open to everyone. Our family thrived in the face of labels and discrimination because we built an independent network. I grew up in this reality. As a young man, I remember these stories, and I witnessed firsthand and even personally experienced the manifestations of racism and classism in the Caribbean, as well as many other forms of discrimination and prejudice that do not necessarily have neat labels. I used to believe that these were relics of the past, colonial residue, that would eventually fade off into the distant memory as we became a more globalized society. But I was wrong. Although racism continues to be a problem across the world, I believe that discrimination, when at its worst, takes a different shape, one of power and control. It has evolved from a localized oppression of the individual to an institutionalized oppression of many, including in the developing world. In the 1960s, during the decolonization of African countries, the first president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, coined a term for this. He called it neocolonialism, which he defines as the use of economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or influence other countries, especially former dependencies. In other words, after the collapse of the empires, oppression did not dissipate from the colonies. Developed countries continued then and now to exert undue influence over developing countries. For example, Barbados became an independent country in 1966, but for all intents and purposes, that was a lie. Independence, by definition, ought to connote self-determination, autonomy, and sovereignty. It ought therefore to translate into the ability to make decisions that empowers you to be free. However, Barbados, like many other developing nations, does not truly have these. We do not freely craft our fate, and our destiny is often in the hands of the economic superpowers, created and controlled by the developed world. Like any other system of discrimination, those that have power leverage that power to maintain the status quo and retain their positions of dominance relative to those that they control. Neocolonialism is no different. An excellent example of this is how the larger developed countries constantly change the rules that developing countries are expected to follow. They then create blacklists to remove the freedom for developing countries to chart their own path. Organizations like the Bank for International Settlements, the IMF and World Bank are but a few of the closed clubs that set the standards without meaningful input or the genuine consideration of the interests of developing countries. We simply do not have a voice in an institutional construct designed to keep us marginalized yet exploited for the benefit of those who tear up the economic chain. I say the time for change is now. Thanks to a new technology called blockchain, it is now possible. This technology provides a tool to mitigate against their control, their barriers and their discrimination. Blockchain technology is a solution that changes the way we represent value and how it is exchanged. For the first time in history, we have a currency system which isn't controlled by men in suits sitting in closed rooms. Blockchain is entirely disruptive to the economic powers of this world. These economic powers design the policies and dictate how the rest of the world is to follow. That ends now. Blockchain provides a tool that allows us to design our own rules and policies, giving us the power to set the narrative. In my opinion, blockchain can be the redemption of the promise of independence we thought we got some 50 years ago. It can sweep away the frictions that separate developing nations from each other and the developed world. I want you to consider a couple of examples. In 2013, I formed a company with a couple of friends called Bit.com, and our goal was to digitize central bank dollars. We spent several years working with regulators, central banks, and monetary authorities to look at how we can take their M0 monetary base and digitize it. But why would we want to do something as crazy as that? Well, for one, accessibility. If a dollar had become digital, it had the ability to be accessible by people all over. The cost of friction and movement of money was now reduced. The efficiency of management is now there. But most importantly, it democratized the payment system. Now, I mentioned an organization earlier that has a level of control that they exert across the world. It's called the Bank for International Settlements. It's how we move money around the world. Earlier on, we talked and mentioned a one currency union for Africa. This is what we've been designing in the Caribbean. A system whereby we can digitize the entire economy of a country, repeat that into another country with another central bank, and through these smart contracts, as they are in the blockchain arena, have things along the lines of direct economic swap agreements, trade-weighted index currencies. These solutions allow us to gain independence and sovereignty because they can no longer de-risk us. They can no longer deem us too high risk and too low reward and remove our ability to become international global citizens. And that's what we're doing in BIT, and that's happening in the Caribbean. We're working with central banks, starting in the region and then moving outwards. Then in Bermuda, as another example, the government's designing a stack of legislation and amendments to local laws that will facilitate and allow blockchain companies to flourish in their local shores. And then they're going to take this stack and make it government as a service, allowing other governments to access these frameworks that will revolutionize the way that economic value is represented and how we trade and how we function in society. Another example, which is happening closer to the African shores, Zambia. Medici Land Governance has just done a deal where they're now allowing people who've never had access to their land title deeds to have digital land title deeds and access to that. That gives people a level of sovereignty and control that they once never had. These are just three very basic examples of three very simple jurisdictions that have disruptive measures happening right now today. But technology cannot end discrimination. For that is entirely within humans. What blockchain can do is ensure each one of us is seen, is included, and perhaps in that way we can help each other create something better. Something that doesn't allow the systematic manifestations of classism, racism, and misogyny, and other forms of discrimination. Something that enables us more actively to use our voice as consumers and as citizens to ensure that whatever centralized powers may be are balanced out by our collective expressed freedom. For in its purest form, blockchain is a technology of community building and intentional freedom. Blockchains are comprised of vast networks that span geographies and circumstances. We've been brought together to determine the standards, the policies, and the mechanisms which this technology operates. And this consensus-based approach ensures that whatever is built is a true reflection of community and the byproduct of genuine collaboration amongst governments and organizations and individuals. What bolder statement of sovereignty and independence is there? What more effective understanding of the power of the individual to power the collective? I'd like to end today by inviting each of you to join in this movement. The technology is inevitable, but how it is built is not yet fully determined. So educate yourself and make the conscious choice to have a say in what the systems that govern our future will look like. May the next young boy or girl born and raised in the Caribbean, or in Queens, or in Africa, never feel invisible, and never feel surprised at finding themselves standing at the pinnacle of both the past and the future again. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. I believe before you, well, you're going to join our panel, but we do have a gift for you. So we'll get that gift to you after the panel. So, you heard from Gabriel, he set it up. Now we're going to have a baraza. Baraza is Swahili for? Discussion. Baraza is Swahili for? Discussion. So now we are going to have a discussion, and I am going to bring up the rest of our panelists. This panel will be on governance, policy, and regulatory frameworks for blockchains. We've got a star-studded panel here. First, I'd like for you to give a warm round of applause to my friend, State Senator Ian Conyers, as he comes up to the table. Keep that applause going for Tanya M. Evans, Robbie Greenfield, and Alexia Hefty. Give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, and Gabriel is sticking around for this panel discussion. Who are we missing? Oh, here we go. Keep that applause coming. This is a power pack panel, y'all. Y'all that don't want to miss this day, okay? There will be, and I think the panel will have some time to take some crowd questions as well. And I must say that when this panel is over, I will be turning you all over to Kimo, because I gotta go, because I gotta go on television today. But this is a lot of time away from me. But this has been so great. I appreciate y'all for rocking with me and rolling with me and keeping it interesting. And I look forward to chatting with many of you again soon. I give you the panel. Give a round of applause.
So I'm not sure how this is supposed to go, but I am a professor of law, so I'm going to command the mic and keep this moving.
Yes.
My name is Tanya Evans. I'm a professor of law at the University of New Hampshire School of Law. I'm also the chair of Intellectual Property and Technology Online Programs. And I am the facilitator and developer of our cryptocurrency, blockchain, and the law suite of courses that we are going to launch in January. It's actually a non-JD program offered fully online. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I suspect that the rest of my panel guests will tee up most likely fintech issues and regulatory issues in that light, and I'm happy to participate in that conversation as well. But I also love the legal panel that offers what I have to offer. We often talk about the rules and regs from a cryptocurrency perspective, but don't focus on the intellectual property issues that attach to open source software projects